The SEC makes history in the NFL draft, but should Quinn Ewers have returned for another season? Locked On SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to Everydayers who are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by the Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Turn any TV into your Xbox. No console needed. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to learn more. All right, let's jump into it as the NFL Draft 2025. The final tallies are in, and the SEC, once again, leads all leagues in total draft picks. Look, you didn't need me to tell you that the SEC is king, but for the 19th consecutive season, the SEC led all conferences in total draft picks across the 7-round draft. The league produced 79 total players in this year's draft, blowing out the previous record for a single draft, which was 65. 15 of the league's 16 teams had at least one player drafted, with Mississippi State the only team shut out from the draft. The Big Ten, they had 71 players selected, pretty strong. But that means the top two leagues in the sport, the SEC and the Big Ten, combined to produce 58% of the overall draft picks. No offense to small school kids, but big boy football, we know where it's being played. Within the league, Georgia, they led the way with 13 total selections. Georgia came very close to matching their 2022 output, which was an all-time record with 15 players selected. Georgia was joined by Ohio State, which had a draft best 14 players selected to become just the fifth and sixth teams in the 7-round draft era to have 13 or more players selected in a single draft. Texas came close. They finished with 12 picks. That was the third most of any team this year. So Georgia with 13, Texas with 12, Ole Miss did well, LSU, Alabama, and Florida all finished in the top 5. This year, the record finally fell when a 66th player was drafted, former Alabama defensive tackle Tim Smith. He came off the board in the 6th round. But if you remember back in 2021, the SEC has set a record for most players selected from a single conference with 65. It went on to tie that record in 2022, and it came close to matching that number again in 2023 at 62, before only seeing 59 players drafted last year. And then this year, that number went up, 66. Just pretty darn impressive. And I get it. You added Oklahoma and Texas, so you had more schools to put players into the draft. But this draft, like we said, will end with the SEC once again leading all conferences in selections. When was the last time they didn't? You got to go back all the way to 2006. That's that year the SEC actually finished behind the ACC and the Big Ten in terms of players drafted. But 15 SEC players were selected in the first round that tied their own record in that department, set in 2020. And is just very impressive to see this constant stream of players going from the SEC to the NFL. The Big Ten, they've created their own pipeline. But the SEC continues to be king when it comes to overall draft selections, running their streak to an outstanding 19 years in a row. Again, can't say enough about it. Just absolutely, absolutely impressive. All right, a few other notes here. Former Alabama quarterback Jalen Milroe, he was selected in the 3rd round on Friday night, the 28th pick of the 3rd round, 92nd overall. The Seahawks selected Jalen Milroe. He becomes the 4th Alabama quarterback to be drafted into the NFL in the last 5 years. He's also the 3rd member of the Crimson Tide to go in the opening 3 rounds of this year's draft. The last time the Seahawks took a quarterback in the 3rd round, by the way, 2012 with a young guy named Russell Wilson. So if Milroe gets anywhere close to the career Russell Wilson had, they will be throwing parades and absolutely celebrating. So we will see. Milroe should get time to develop there as a passer. Seahawks don't need him to come in and play immediately. They signed Sam Darnold to a 3-year deal this offseason, and they also brought in Drew Lock to back up Darnold. So Milroe probably going to be 3rd on the depth chart, plenty of time to learn and develop as a better passer. How about Ole Miss? They broke a record for draft picks this year as 8 Ole Miss players were drafted. The Rebels setting a program record for most players taken in one round during the taken in one draft rather during the 7-round draft. You had Walter Nolan. You had, of course, Jackson Dart going in the first round. Then you had guys like Trey Harris, Trey Amos, Princely Amon-Mielen, Jordan Watkins, Chris Paul, J.J. Pegues. I mean, the list goes on and on. Lane Kiffin certainly has done a pretty outstanding job of getting NFL caliber talent into that program there more and more there at Ole Miss. How about over at South Carolina? They made a little history with 2 more players selected in the 4th round. Following the 4th round, South Carolina saw 5 of its players taken in the first 4 rounds of the draft for the first time in program history. Or South Carolina edge Kyle Kennard, he was taken in the 4th round. 10 picks later, you had Tonka Hemingway. On Friday night, you had Nick Emanwari. TJ Sanders was grabbed by the Bills. The Bengals picked up Demetrius Knight. So, yeah, good showing for South Carolina. Shane Beamer getting dudes into the league. How about who didn't fare well? Oklahoma, they saw their decades-long streak come to an end. One of their more impressive streaks with just 2 players selected in the NFL draft. Oklahoma's streak of 22 consecutive years with at least 3 picks officially ended. Former OU linebacker Danny Stutzman was taken in the 4th round by the Saints, and defensive back Billy Bowman went in with the 118th pick, I believe, to the Falcons. But the 2 picks for Oklahoma, the fewest in a single draft for the program since 2002. Sooners did not have a player taken during the first 3 rounds of the draft the first time since 2014. And Stutzman's selection at 112 marked the latest draft spot for the first Oklahoma pick in a draft since 1997. Oklahoma's streak of 22 drafts with at least 3 players was the 3rd longest in the nation entering this year's draft. OU also entered this year's event with the 4th most selections of any school in draft history. The 49 all-time first-round Oklahoma draft picks ranks among the most in the country. So, Brett Venables, you got a mission. Get some guys into the draft there over at OU. Get some more NFL caliber talent in. Over at Florida, they saw a notable streak end. Florida had an unusually quiet first 2 days of the NFL draft, as OnlyGators.com noted the 2025 NFL draft marked the first time in over a decade that Florida did not have a player selected in the first 3 rounds. They went on to have a guy or 2 in the draft taken, but not in the first 3 rounds. So that was an impressive one that came to an end. How about over at Auburn? Jarquez Hunter finally got Auburn on the board as he was selected by the Rams in the 4th round of the draft on Saturday afternoon. Rams even traded up 10 spots to go get Jarquez Hunter, but took him with the 117th overall pick. Hunter was the first Auburn player to be selected in the 2025 draft, and it took until day 3 for the Tigers to have somebody come off the board. Their social media team had a little bit of fun with it, and a lot of people were making fun of Auburn. Oh, you guys don't get guys in the league anymore? But that was a good one for them. How about over at Tennessee on Saturday? They saw Dylan Sampson, the SEC Offensive Player of the Year, get picked up by the Browns in the 4th round of the draft. That pick put the Vols in a rare club. They're the only program in the country to have a running back taken within the first 4 rounds of the draft over the last 2 seasons. Last year, Jalen Wright was a 4th round pick. This year, Dylan Sampson was a 4th round pick. And as Bill Martin noted, every running back that has started for Tennessee in the Josh Heupel era is now in the NFL. You got Jalen Wright, who led the Vols in rushing in 22 and 23. Then you had Jabari Small, the team's leading rusher in 2021, signed with the Titans as an undrafted free agent. And now Dylan Sampson drafted in the 4th round by the Cleveland Browns. Over at Vandy, they saw a long snapper finally bring their to an end their draft drought. It took until day 3 of this year's draft, but Vanderbilt's 3-year streak without having a player drafted came to an end. Long snapper Julian Ashby was taken with the 251st overall pick by the New England Patriots, and a Vanderbilt Commodore finally back in the NFL draft. Before Ashby was picked on Saturday, the last Vanderbilt player who was drafted was defensive end Dayo Odeyingbo back in the 2021 draft, 54th overall. So finally, another Vanderbilt player gets drafted. But Vandy's draft streak was just the second time in the history of the SEC that a program went 3 consecutive drafts without having a player drafted. The other time it happened, naturally, was Vanderbilt. Commodores went 93, 94, 95 without having a player drafted. But remarkably, 310 players from the SEC were drafted since Vanderbilt's last player had been taken. And now that number is gone with the selection of Ashby on Saturday. And we mentioned only one SEC team did not have a single player pick during this year's draft, and that was Mississippi State, part of a small group of Power 4 teams to go without a player selected last year. Of course, they're coming off that disappointing 2-10 season. Jeff Lebby really went through it. I mean, a full overhaul of that roster there. He's trying to grab guys in the transfer portal and all that. So Mississippi State trying to build for a better future. Now, here's the caveat. I mean, you had guys who were at Mississippi State that went elsewhere. Woody Marks got drafted by the Texans. He spent 1 year at USC. Prior to that, he spent 4 years at Mississippi State. So, did we consider Woody Marks a Mississippi State player? I get it. He didn't finish there. He ended at USC and it was productive for them. But I think Mississippi State, you at least get half a vote for Woody Marks, a guy who spent majority of his career there. All right. Thanks, you guys, for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Coming up next, we'll pose the question, did Quinn Ewers make a mistake going pro and not sticking around another year in college? We'll discuss that coming your way in a second. But first, I want to remind you guys, the NBA playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you're going to get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. You're going to love how FanDuel makes betting so easy, whether it's picking your favorite team or checking out some of their player props, from three-pointers to steals to assists. FanDuel, they got so many ways for you to bet on your favorite player props. And also, after the game tips, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. And it's not just NBA. I got a lot of the future college bets up there as well. You want to get on the Heisman odds, you want to get in on some of those week 1 games, they got it for you there at FanDuel. Some over-unders as well on win totals. Do not miss out. Head on over to FanDuel.com and go claim your $250 in bonus bets. That is at FanDuel.com. Get signed up and take advantage of that $250 in bonus bets. All right, we're along here, Locked On SEC, part of Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And for those of you who watch the NFL Draft, look, I'm a big draft nut. We'll get into more college discussion, but it's fun to see these guys that we've watched and covered through the SEC the last couple of years go on and make their dreams become a reality and take their talents to the next level and become an NFL draft pick. But there are some guys that you kind of question, did they make the right decision? One of those is Quinn Ewers, who joins an unfortunate company with the 7th round NFL draft selection. He was the #1 overall recruit in the 2021 signing class, according to the 24/7 composite. And on Saturday, Quinn Ewers was finally selected with the 231st overall pick in the 7th round of the NFL draft. And with his selection, he joined only a handful of former #1 overall recruits to be taken beyond the opening 2 days of the NFL draft. Since 2010, just 4 of the 13 draft-eligible players who were rated the top-ranked recruit in the country were selected outside of the first round. Yeah, Dorial Green Beckham was a 2nd-round pick in 2015 after playing for Mizzou in Oklahoma. Ronald Powell was a 5th-round pick in 2014 after a 5-year career at Florida. Trenton Thompson, a former Georgia D lineman, he's the only former #1 recruit since 2010 to go undrafted. Ewers was looking pretty close to going undrafted on Saturday until the Dolphins pulled the trigger on pick 231. But as a recruit, Ewers had a rare and historic 1.0000 rating, basically, 100%, 1,000% hit rate in the composite. The scout for 24/7 Sports, who evaluated him, wrote that Ewers would be an impact high major starter with the potential to be taken high in the draft. He was given a 1st-round projection at the time and compared to Phillip Rivers. Now, look, Ewers was a high major level impact starter in college. He led Texas to a Big 12 title in 2023, led the Longhorns to an SEC championship appearance this year. They also made it to consecutive appearances in the college football playoff. They won a playoff game this year, or two, right? Clemson, Arizona State. And Quinn Ewers went 27-9 as a starter. Now, the injuries certainly hurt him, I think, a little bit, but Quinn Ewers was the 13th quarterback drafted in this year's draft class. So Quinn Ewers is going to have plenty of motivation in Miami. And, look, 7th-round pick, you can go back and look at a guy like Brock Purdy. He was 7th-rounder, made the most of his opportunity. Matt Castle, another 7th-rounder that carved out an NFL career. But Dolphins GM Chris Greer said in January that every stone would be overturned as the team focused on finding a backup quarterback for Tua Tagovailoa, who missed a career-high 6 games last year. They signed veteran Zach Wilson in free agency, and they added Quinn Ewers in the 7th round on Saturday. But Greer saying, look, Sark really likes him, was very high on him, talked about him playing through his injuries this year, which affected his play a little bit, and we like him. So Quinn Ewers now fighting for that backup job with the Miami Dolphins with Zach Wilson to essentially back up to Tagovailoa. But 13 quarterbacks drafted, and look, nobody thought Quinn Ewers was going to be a first-round pick, but Cam Ward and Jackson Dart ended up in the 1st round. Tyler Shuck from Louisville went to the Saints in the 2nd round. I thought, if anything, he would fall into that category with Jalen Milroe and Dylan Gabriel in the 3rd round. In fact, Dylan Gabriel went in the 3rd round and Quinn Ewers went in the 7th. I think is a little bit of a joke. Like, I would have given Ewers the benefit of the doubt, and I didn't take him as the 3rd or 4th rounder. Of course, in the 5th round, you had Shedeur Sanders finally go off the board to the Browns. That was one of the big storylines of the weekend. And then you get into some names in the 6th round. Kyle McCord from Syracuse. Was it Will Howard to the Steelers? Riley Leonard from Notre Dame to the Colts? Then the real shocker, Graham Mertz from Florida to the Texans. That one was just like, Graham Mertz went ahead of Quinn Ewers? Then you even had Cam Miller from North Dakota State went to the Raiders. And then the 7th, Curtis Rourke from Indiana goes to the 49ers ahead of Quinn Ewers. So Quinn Ewers was the last pick quarterback in this year's draft. Absolutely crazy. Now, look, Arch Manning is coming in or been waiting in the wings there at Texas. But it brought the topic up to me. Should Quinn Ewers have stuck in college another year? If you guys remember, before Texas competed in that college football playoff semis, there was a report from On 3 Sports that said Ewers had an NIL offer to enter the transfer portal and go elsewhere. I mean, it was clear their heir apparent Arch Manning has been waiting in the wings. And so Quinn would have to go play elsewhere this year if he wanted to play. The Texas job is taken. But Ewers entered this draft class knowing there were concerns over his arm strength, some worried about a nagging injury that hampered him this season. And throughout the NIL era, there has been an interesting theme running at the NFL draft, whether a player could have earned more money by staying in school. The estimated slot value of pick number 231, where he went, is around $4.3 million total over 4 years. So it's one thing to say $4 million for just next year. It's $4 million over 4 years. But as a starting quarterback with SEC experience, had Quinn Ewers gone into the transfer portal a few weeks ago, he could have fetched easily over $3 million, according to On3. And maybe even as much as $4 million with the right suitors. When you consider Carson Beck, what he got from Miami, Quinn Ewers certainly could have been in the mix as a starting quarterback at Miami or Notre Dame or some of these other schools that really needed a quarterback. And the fact that it never really was a question that he was going to go pro, I don't know. It raises some questions, man. Like, again, did Quinn Ewers make the wrong decision? Should he have come back to school? And, I think, like, talking financially, that would have been the better decision for him, just based on where he fell. You went in the 7th round to the Miami Dolphins. Going to make $1 million next year total. He would have made more than that, sticking around one more year of college. And maybe he could have proved to be healthy all year and could have, quelled some of those concerns about his injuries he had, that sort of thing. So I don't know. Wish Quinn Ewers the best of luck, but it certainly is one of those interesting that his former number one overall prospect coming out of high school and ends up a 7th round pick, 13th quarterback drafted in this draft. Again, there's a few in there like Graham Mertz. Graham Mertz wasn't even the best quarterback at Florida. It's DJ Lagway, but like to say he was a better pro prospect than Quinn Ewers, I had a little bit of an issue with that, but that's all right. Best of luck to Quinn. He's probably in a good spot with the way Tua gets concussed every year. I'm making light of it, but goodness. Be ready to play. Head on a swivel, Quinn Ewers. You might be going in there. They'll call your number. One quick note here. Nick Saban revealed a couple of things on his draft coverage, part of the ABC team over the weekend. He talked about his biggest recruiting mistake ever. He said was not getting Mason Taylor to Alabama away from LSU. After Taylor was selected by the New York Jets in the 2nd round over the weekend, Saban admitted the biggest recruiting mistake he made. He said, this guy is the best tight end we had in camp. And he got away. Ended up going to Baton Rouge and LSU. And, oh, by the way, caught the game winner against LSU or Bama versus LSU 2 years ago. And LSU beat Alabama in that game. So we'll see if the son of legendary NFL pass rusher Jason Taylor can make a big impact with the New York Jets. One of the things Saban mentioned on the broadcast, though, he said on ABC that Alabama tried to get West Virginia O-lineman Wyatt Milam every year in the portal. Milam was drafted by the Jaguars in the 3rd round. Some folks took Saban to task there saying, is that blatant tampering? It's one thing to say you tried to get the kid once or you tried to, people around him tried to talk him into going to the portal. But saying you tried to get him every year in the portal when he wasn't in the portal, again, insinuates maybe some tampering going on there. But Saban doesn't coach anymore, so all that is water under the bridge. All right, still more to come here on Locked On SEC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. Hey, look, there's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena. And with the Game Time app, you can be part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Game Time, they're going to make it fast and easy for you to get playoff tickets, even when demand is sky high. Prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. They're all-in pricing. It means no surprise fees at checkout. What you see is what you pay. Go take the guesswork out of buying tickets with the Game Time app. Download Game Time today, create an account, and use our code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. If you've never used them before, you will get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, get $20 off. I'm telling you, whatever you need, whether it's sporting events, concerts, comedy shows, theater, whatever it is, download Game Time today. It is last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed, and make sure you use that code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE to get $20 off your first purchase. All right, roll on here. Final segment of Locked On SEC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And how about the portal? The spring transfer portal window closing as far as guys wanting to jump in the portal. Quick discretion here. You can still jump in if you're a grad transfer. So if you're a graduate transfer, I believe you still can move. But as far as now, here's the other thing. You don't have to have picked a school yet. All you have to do is get your name in the portal. When you're in the portal, you still have time to pick the new team you want. But as far as trying to enter the portal and go elsewhere, that window has closed. And how about Alabama, the only SEC team to not lose a scholarship player in the spring portal? It's something very difficult and hard to do. But the Alabama Crimson Tide got through the spring transfer window without one scholarship player leaving. Every other SEC team suffered losses to their roster this spring, except for Alabama, which was able to navigate through the portal, come out with 0 scholarship players looking for a new school. Their ability to do the near impossible sets up Kalen DeBoer well heading into year 2. And their GM, Courtney Morgan, did a good job of roster management, keeping guys happy, taking care of them with NIL and revenue share and all that kind of stuff. So we'll see if it equals more wins on the football field for Alabama heading into year 2 of the Kalen DeBoer era. How about over at Florida? They picked up a commitment in the portal from Baylor transfer D lineman Brendan Bett. He announced his news over the weekend via social media. Heads to Florida after 2 seasons at Baylor. Made just 1 appearance last year in the Texas Bowl, which allowed him to use a red shirt for the seasons. He'll have 3 full seasons of eligibility remaining. In 2023, played in 10 games that year, earned a start against Houston. Graded out as the 4th highest rated interior freshman D lineman in 2023. So some familiarity on that staff. Florida defensive coordinator Ron Roberts coached him at Baylor back in 2020 through 2022. So a little bit of familiarity there on the recruiting trail. But Florida saw DeAndre Robinson enter his name into the portal after an impressive debut season in 2024. So welcome in Brendan Bett from Baylor coming to Florida. How about over at LSU? They added a defensive lineman, Bernard Gooden, through the portal, coming from South Florida, 6'1", 280-pound D lineman from USF, and announced he's heading to LSU. Played in 13 games last year, had 35 tackles, 10 for a loss, 1.5 sacks. So very productive D lineman going to join the LSU Tigers. How about over at Georgia? They added a UCF transfer, offensive lineman in the portal. Walt Claire Flynn Jr. coming over from UCF will head to the Bulldogs. And 6'2", 300-pound interior lineman will have 4 years of college eligibility remaining. Spent just the 1 season at UCF. Over at Arkansas, defensive back 2023 recruit entering the portal, Christian Ford. He was a member of Arkansas's 2023 recruiting class. Signed with Arkansas back then. Redshirted as a true freshman in 23 and 24. Did not see any action there on the field. It's the second Arkansas player to enter the portal at the last minute in terms of guys going into the portal before the deadline ended. Running back Tyrell Reed also went into the portal. He was credited with a rushing and receiving touchdown this past year. Limited action. Of course, the freshman quarterback Madden Iamaliava kicked off last week, entering the portal. Reportedly heading to UCLA to join his brother. But they did get in return on last Thursday. They got quarterback Trevor Jackson, a former 4-star recruit, joining the program after spending a year at Florida State. So Razorbacks trying to do what they can through that portal, but again, lose a couple guys last minute to the portal. How about over at Florida? Florida transfer D lineman announced his commitment to play for North Carolina. DeAndre Robinson. We told you he was in the portal. Didn't know where he's headed. He's going to North Carolina to go play for Bill Belichick and Bill Belichick's girlfriend, who tells him in national interviews, cannot talk about where we met or how long we've been dating, so on and so forth. Thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. For your second listen, check out the Portal Show. Brian Smith has the latest rumors, portal entries, and signings. Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to the college football landscape. Find the Portal on YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast. I'm Chris Gordy. This has been Locked On SEC. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. Hope you had a great weekend, and we'll talk to you later this week with more on Locked On SEC. We'll be talking more on the future of football. Saying goodbye to all these guys who are out the window going to the NFL draft. Start talking more about looking ahead to the 2025 season. Some of the guys and teams with big and higher expectations. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow right here on Locked On SEC.